Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are on a mission to answer 4 questions from some of the best leaders and leadership minds in the country. So with that, we are pleased to have our featured special guest, Scott Wozniak. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, man. Good to be here, Dave.
Good to have you. Like I said, I'm glad we were finally able to make this happen. So always start out, introduce yourself to the listeners, a little bit about your background, who you are, what you do. Basically, just give us the whole scoop on Scott.
Yeah, man. I've had a wild, fun career ride. Long story short, I now run a consulting agency helping people build great brands. We call them legendary brands.
I'm digging it.
I spent my career as a senior leader helping to build some of the big brands of our time. Most notably, I was a senior guy at Chick-fil-A, and my job was to create the customer experience systems that built all this stuff. And in fact, it was the weirdest, coolest job. We ended up saying, hey, we don't need you to work in the business and run a department. We have guys for that. We want you to work on the business. And so 50% of the time, I traveled the world, went inside other companies, learned how they operated. They just kind of called like, hey, we got our guy. Can our guy come in? And I went and learned how the best companies in the world worked. And the other half of the job was come back and turn that into some sort of upgrade program for Chick-fil-A. So that's how I started meeting all these guys and started working with all these big players. And man, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now.
Nice.
That job. And then I left eventually. And the first client to sign me was Chick-fil-A. So I get to keep working with them. But now we've got kind of a whole consulting team, got 20 folks on staff, and we run around helping people build the kind of tools and systems that make them an awesome company. So leadership is a huge part. I've worked with leaders. I've had to directly lead massive, multi-billion-dollar projects around the world. But I've also literally, one of my projects for Chick-fil-A was, hey, let's upgrade our leadership development program. So I had to go study the best leadership training programs in the world. Went to Harvard and Duke and West Point and like, how do the best do this? And then we brought all that back and built custom programs. So this is near and dear to my heart because, man, all the coolest ideas in the world don't happen unless a leader actually drives and makes something move forward. So yeah, man, personally and strategically, like myself and trying to help others do it, I do a lot with leaders, trying to help leaders get to the next level.
Cool. Well, just for folks that maybe not know the story, and I'm sure you plugged in probably right after this point, but tell a little bit about the story where Kathy went to a high-end resort hotel and the customer experience was so good. That's where the My Pleasure and what you expect today from God's Chicken. That's what.
That's right.
Anyway, that's what. That's kind of the origin of where it started from, and now it's kind of evolved into what it is today. But tell folks a little bit about how that happened, and then how he kind of brought that in and fill them in.
Yeah. So the chain you're talking about is the famous Ritz-Carlton chain. Now Truett was a guy who grew up in the Depression. Sorry, if you don't know, Truett Cathy was the founder of Chick-fil-A.
Right.
Wholly owned the joint, bootstrapped it. He was a restaurateur and just kind of built this thing up. So he has passed. It's been about 10 years now. But Truett, I got to come work directly with Truett. So actually, my history of them goes before working for them, how I got connected. I went to high school with Andrew Cathy, who's Truett's grandson.
Oh, wow.
Andrew and I played 3 sports together and rode dirt bikes, and great dude.
Sweet.
But, this is 30 some years ago. I graduated high school and I'm like, hey, good luck with your little mall restaurant. Hope you make it. They're going to make it, Dave. I think
so. Yeah.
Yeah. They were like 22 billion in sales last year. So they're going to be okay. So when I left and had adventures and became a consultant, and then eventually that's where they're like, wait, what are you doing? And maybe you should come help us with our strategies. And so when I came on staff, Truett was still working. So I got to be a part of the last several years of Truett's professional life and see that transition. And
sweet.
I saw him as a grandfather, but then I got to see him as like, he was my boss, went to his office, went to his house. Phenomenal guy. And so Truett was a Depression era kid. He was raised in the Great Depression. So man, if you know that generation, they did not like spending money. They great value in saving money. And so Truett didn't stay a lot at the Ritz-Carlton because he's like, it's a hotel. It's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
But they started doing events like conferences and have him come speak. And so they started inviting him to the Ritz. And he's like, oh, this is nice. And like, oh, check. But the stuff he was excited about wasn't the high expensive decor. It was like well, Mr. Cathy, it's my pleasure. And, oh, well, here you go, sir. All the fancy language. He was like, ooh, that's nice. And that's free. By the way, that's my Truett impersonation.
Yeah.
That's free. We're doing that, everybody. My pleasure. And so he'd make us practice. Hey, you say my pleasure and you say my pleasure. And so there's this video montage we end up putting together of like 7 years in a row. Every time Truett gave a speech, he's like, oh, and by the way, everybody stand up. We're practicing my pleasure. Like,
that's cool.
Hammered it. And it was this unlock of this idea. Hey, just because we are in an industry that's the lower end price wise, like it's fast food, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we can't bring the high end levels of service. Who says fast food can't talk like a fine dining restaurant? Like,
right.
Why not? Like, we aren't going to serve steak, but we can treat you like we are. Why not? And of course, everyone's like, well, it's fast food. You just don't do that. He's like, so let's do it. And it's really an interesting leadership moment because I'll be honest, just real frank. The first couple of years, the executives were all like, I mean, yeah, that's a cool idea, but like, it's not that big a deal.
Well, it's funny because that's what I heard. I heard that, he would they would secret shopper, they go to the stores or whatever. Nobody was saying it. It was really like grating on his nerves. Like, what the heck, man?
Yes. Okay. Now, like, it literally was year 3 when, like, I met Dan, his son, who ended up being the next CEO, like, turned and was like, I think he's actually serious about this. Like, maybe she's like stupid on us. But the reason I think it's a great leadership moment, Dave, because think about this. The guy owned the place entirely, right? There's no other authority figure from an ownership standpoint.
Correct.
And at that point in time, you couldn't be more respected than Truett was in this category. He had lived a life of service and excellence. And like, the guy was like, literally every week at the office, somebody would give him another like lifetime achievement award. And we had a little like shelf, like a cabinet at the entryway. You'd be like, oh, what awards did Truett win this month? That's interesting. Like, everybody loved him. And he couldn't get the change made. He's like, you'd think I own the place. I've got all the authority. I've got all the respect. Leadership is you just tell them what to do. Job done, right? Check the box. We move on.
Sounds good.
Not so much, right? Even Truett stinking Cathy couldn't make it happen by just decreeing it to the staff. We had to put the leadership team on it, talk about how do we make this fit in the organization and actually lead the change. And then what do you know? It's become one of the things Chick-fil-A is known for these days.
Well, and the thing I loved about that story, although I know he had to be god-awful frustrated, it's like, hey, like I said, I own 100% of this and I'm the man. And like, you're not listening to me. And I'm telling you over and over and over.
About, right? Like,
right. What did I stutter? Right? He's kind of like, holding his arms down, make sure there's no drift, face not drooping. Did I have a stroke? Did I stutter? What happened? Right. But it's a picture perfect case study on the power of organizational culture.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the leader says from the top down until it gets ingrained in culture. And I know they've said over and over and over again, you got to constantly sell it. Anytime you're trying to do some kind of cultural change, it is a constant sell job until it just gets habit. And it's, well, that's just the way we do things. Why wouldn't we do that?
Now it's got this momentum, man. Like, my kids will say my pleasure instead of you're welcome because it like trickles all the way down. Like, the whole Chick-fil-A community is like, what? That's just how you talk. But yeah, there was a time when it was like not. And so that shift, that's leadership. That's what leaders do, man.
They just keep pounding the drum and keep selling the idea and pushing and pushing and pushing until that idea becomes a reality.
Yes. Creating what I call the new normal, right? Like, oh,
yes,
it's just normal. Somebody created that.
So exactly. And that, like I said, and that's a perfect example of organizational culture. And even in a great organization, how hard it is to steer that ship and make that change, no matter how positive it is. It's sort of like, yeah, but the status quo and inertia is really tough to overcome.
That's legit, man.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny because I worked there years ago when I was in high school when it was just the mall, brown drab, polyester. There was no my pleasure, no chickens, no nothing. It was just chicken. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, listen, Dave, these were the dark days. We didn't even have Chick-fil-A sauce back then, man. Like, it was rough.
Hey, but at least the ice cream machines worked.
Oh, yeah, seriously.
Sorry, man. I had to
take that, right?
I know I had to get that. I had to get the dig in. Although it's funny you talk about it on the low end of spectrum as far as fast food. As far as in the fast food genre, there were two things about that I noticed. One from an article and one from just in general.
Yeah.
the prices were always on the high end of the fast food. And I figured out, well, obviously why is because everything is fresh and everything is made fresh.
Yep.
You don't get stuff frozen in, just heat it up and, you know, throw it in a bag and sling it to somebody. So, I
Right.
mean, that's a big one. And then I read an article about strategy where Chick-fil-A really took it low and slow for a long time, building up their cadre of stores. And you had, I think they compared it to Wendy's, who just went on a building blitz and just went out and then realized, hey, at first they were kind of laughing like, haha, you know, I'll see your chicken sandwich and raise you a biggie and a chili, right?
Right,
And
right.
but the problem is they almost expanded too fast, couldn't keep the culture, couldn't keep the standards, and then it really struggled. And then, like I said, Chick-fil-A on the low and slow pace is obviously just outshined everybody now, but it took a minute.
Yeah, no, it was the key, and the heart of it was leadership. No surprise. They said, "Listen, we can't grow faster than our ability to find, select, and train great franchise partners. If those in-store leaders aren't fully cared for, bought in, we don't get the right partners selected, we don't give them all the right tools to run the core operations that they need. That's the bottleneck, is not how much money. This is where most people think, how much money can I get to build locations? And Chick-fil-A said, literally, they run on cash. They don't do debt. At $22 billion, they don't have debt. It's ridiculous, right? They have money. Banks are like, please let us loan you money.
Like, no.
But they said the bottleneck for us is not how much money we can get. We're not going to build the stores based on our money. We're going to build it based on how many leaders we can find. And that's backwards. Other places are like, I have money, go put a body in it, it'll be fine. And that's where the whole thing starts breaking down.
Exactly.
Start with leaders.
You're right, it's not fine.
No, it is classic. They grew big. In fact, everyone at Chick-fil-A back in I was not here then. They tell stories about it. Like, oh no, maybe we should borrow money. And Truett, like, just slammed his hand down, put his foot down and was like, no, we will get better and let our customers make us bigger. Our goal's not bigger for bigger's sake. Our goal's better. And if we keep getting better, they'll take care of the bigger.
Exactly. And well, like I said, if you have the right leadership in place, this is one of the things I realize, and I use this in a story in my keynotes. It's like people are like, oh, why do you fault of a chicken sandwich? And they kind of look at me like I got 3 heads. Good job at Chick-fil-A, and you'll really appreciate this. And I told him, I said like I told you, it was balls only, brown polyester. There was no chickens, no my pleasure, none of that. It was just girl stuff yet. It was just chicken,
very
right? That's it. Right. And some lady out there with a tray sampling, with the mall, and it'd be like 100 people deep during Christmas, right? But I mean, it's just chicken. But what I realized is, I mean, I didn't know any better. I'm stupid. I'm 15 and a half, get a work permit from the city. I go down there working because a friend of mine, she was like, oh, this place is great. It's fast food, it's hard work, it wasn't a lot of money, but everybody there enjoyed coming to work. They looked forward to coming to work. It was a great environment and great atmosphere. Even when it was so busy during the Christmas, people still really enjoyed it. The owner operator always had a great Christmas party. I mean, just really treated everybody like gold, and it trickled down. Obviously, the managers and the team leads always treated everybody the same, and it was great. But what you didn't realize is you just think you're just stupid, right? Because you spend 3-4 years there and you're thinking that's just what work is until you leave and go somewhere else. And you're like, this sucks, right? Bad bosses, crappy work, schedule, the whole 9 yards, like real life, right? And so the funny part was I would say, hey, why is it like this? It could be like that. And of course, I'm young and stupid, and they're looking at me like, look, boy, that doesn't exist. I'm like, look, old man, I just spent the last 20% of my life working.
Yeah, right.
I was just there. I just left there. I'm telling you, that exists. I lived that for 3 or 4 years. And they're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about, boy. That doesn't exist. And I'm like, look, old man, you're full of expletive of choice, right? I'm like, I'm telling you, I lived it. It does exist. And that cognitive dissonance just bugged the mess out of me for years. And then when I went back, I realized, okay, this didn't happen by accident. This was deliberate. This was intentional. They create, long before you guys kicked in and really poured gasoline on the customer experience fire, they had something good going on culture-wise.
Yeah.
Treating their people great. And I'm like, okay, that didn't happen by accident. One of the big reasons I wanted to go back to school is I just had this insatiable appetite to learn, how did he do what he did? How did he build the culture that he did at that store and they did at the company? You know what? Obviously, there's something to it. It didn't happen by accident. They know what they're doing. I want to learn how they did that. And so that was kind of one of the impetuses of,
awesome. That's how we get the great Dave Miles of today, right?
I don't know. Like I said, that got me back to the region, going back and saying, okay, I want to find out exactly, what did this guy do? I want to learn as much as I can about, building that type of culture. And that's why it's so fun watching from the outside, seeing the different changes, going, okay, I know what they did to pick that. And okay, that was intentional. That didn't happen. That took a minute to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah. It's
100%. But yeah, I tell everybody, getting into doing what I'm doing, it's all the fault of a chicken sandwich.
Well, maybe I need to start borrowing that line too, because it changed my life as well, man. They're human, but you're right. There's some fundamentals there that they've been working on for decades that it just pays off, man. Good leadership always pays off.
Well, and I like that word too. I just think about a championship sports franchise. It's the fundamentals. They work on the fundamentals over and over and over and over until it just, it oozes out of their pores and they don't even think about it anymore. Most people don't even consider that was an option.
Yeah. Everyone wants to get to the fancy stuff, man, but the fundamentals win or lose everything else. And so, yeah, that's, it's never not going to pay off to get better at your fundamentals.
Yeah. And it's funny when you were talking about culture is that one of the things that I kind of behind the curtain, I realized that you got in an organization, you got good filters and bad filters, right? Mm-hmm. The most efficient, I always joke about the most efficient filtration system in the world for most companies is not activated charcoal. It's not reverse osmosis. It's middle management.
Yes. Dang it. Yeah.
Because they're not going to tell the CEO, hey, boss, guess what? My division or my team sucks and they hate it and the engagement's low and they're all quitting, right? That's never going to be said. And then
it makes it into the report.
No. And then you have the employee engagement survey. And, the whole executive team is on meltdown because the scores are bad. They're not going to go down there and, what's the report that gets back to the frontline managers and supervisors and staff? Well, we got some, opportunities for this next coming year and painted in corporate speak, but they never get the real story. Yeah. So they're the best filtration system in the world.
Wow.
And I found the worst filtration system in the world is frontline employees.
Huh. And
I say that because you as a manager, team lead, frontline supervisor, VP, director, whatever, you can't dump on them. All the organizational crap on them and then expect them to filter that through and get rainbows and puppy dogs and blue skies and unicorns to the customer. It doesn't happen.
No, it's they're going to pass all that crap down as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you got the best filtration system in the world and the worst filtration system in the world.
That's awesome.
All in organizations.
That's it's so true. I've seen that both sides. I've never used that analogy before, but dude, I might start borrowing that one. That's brilliant, Dave. That's awesome.
Yeah, have at it. Like I said, but there's a whole lot of truth in that because you see a lot of places that say, "Oh, the customer is the most important." No, not really. And I hate to say that, but I mean, if your employees are the most important, they will treat your customers like they're the most important.
I would totally agree. I would say the number one goal is that the customers have a good experience.
Correct.
But the most important way to get to that goal is by taking care of your people. And so that's the confusion. It's like, well, if without customers, we don't have a business, right? But how do you get a good customer experience?
You can't serve your customer if you don't have an employee there to serve them. And guess what? Years ago, and I'm sure you've encountered this before, I've been in different jobs and different positions. And at the time, it was actually some truth to it. All right, boy, you want to leave? Fine. I got 50 people waiting in line to take your job.
Yeah.
So you kind of suck it up and deal with it. Them days are gone, man. Mm-hmm. You ask anybody in HR, anybody in recruiting, anybody owning a business, those days of just people lined out the door for every position are gone.
Yeah, it's harder to hire these days. 5 years ago, I was complaining about how hard it was to hire. And now I think those are the good old days, man. It's crazy how hard it's getting. It's intense. Yes. And so you can't keep good people. you're in trouble, man. I think this is the game. Like the difference between companies that win and don't are the ones that can keep the good people these days.
Yes. And I remember, and please fill in the blanks for me because I don't remember the entire point by point story and philosophy.
Sure.
But I remember reading a number of years back, let's say going back to Chick-fil-A, that they know because of most of the employees they have, they got high school kids, college kids, whatever, they know that there's automatically built in a certain level of churn. They get out of college, they're going to go be an engineer, they get their, they're going to go into med school, they're going to leave. And you know that. But for the ones that do stay, it's almost like they put this inordinate amount of effort into one, treating them well, treating them all well, but making sure that those are the ones that you're going to cultivate your leaders from, of that small percentage that at least has a chance to stay versus the transitory student population.
Yeah, no, this is exactly right. There's two paths, and they really clearly line up, and they talk to the staff about the two options. Is like the temporary zone, and they're like, look, we're going to pour into you and we're going to invest in you. Now you're like, why would you invest in the temporary guys? Right. Because they actually do. Here's what I found.
Well, the tuition reimbursement and all that stuff. Yeah. Scholarships.
Yeah. And we'll even do leadership development and life skills and like job training. And like, why would you do that for a guy who's at college and he's going to be gone in 3 to 4 years at max, right? Because if you do that, then the best college students show up. And so you pour into them. What that means is, okay, but then there's a whole other level, like, okay, we're going to attract and keep the temporaries, and we know it, and we're going to celebrate it. Great. Some of our best folks have been like, I'm just doing this while I'm getting my degree, and we celebrate that. And then you're like, but some people were like, you might need to, this might be a career for you. Maybe it's someone who kind of grew up in it from 16 on, and they love it. And then every now and then there's a college kid where it's like, she's like, I just needed a job. And 2 years into it, she's like, actually,
I'm digging this.
I think I maybe want to hang around. And we're like, why don't you come to this side of the house? Think about the long-term leadership. And it's funny because people underestimate how substantial the role is. So I'll do a little plug for all the Chick-fil-A franchisees looking for.
Please.
The scale of a Chick-fil-A restaurant is so much bigger than most people realize because nobody else in the fast food industry has it. And Dave, I don't know if you've heard these numbers lately, but like a typical Chick-fil-A these days, a freestanding restaurant will have 200 to 300 employees, man.
Wow.
The average volume of a Chick-fil-A in 24 was about $8 million, a little over $8 million.
Well, I always used to laugh that, especially here locally, and I went and visited my brother in Chesapeake, and they got one of the brand new design stores where someone's got like almost like a drive under thing in the separate side building, and it's this Taj Mahal of Chick-fil-A. Right? I'd never seen one before, but I was like, holy crap. But I joked that when you get bestowed the owner operator and you get the all that stuff, it's almost like you get something. You also not just get something from Chick-fil-A saying congratulations, you're an owner operator. You also get a letter from the federal treasury saying you now have a license to print money. and as you see the 2 lines or 3 lines around the corner and everybody out there with their tablets just working it, you're like, I see you got your letter from the treasury, and it's
maybe no. And for context, like a lot of other fast food joints are like $1.5 million a year. The big boys are like $2.5 million a year. And then you got Chick-fil-A where the average is 8. There's a lot of these places that are 10, $12 million a year with 250 employees. Like this is running a meaningful business.
Yes.
And so that's why there are folks who can say, wait a minute, there's a real career here. But again, it's very interesting. There's this small percentage that carry the bulk of the leadership, and you pour into that leadership. And that's really the thread. If you've got good leaders who hang around, then you can put high school and college kids through a cycle because the leaders are going to keep this thing solid and steady. And I don't just mean the franchisee, like they usually have a leadership team.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. It's even like where I worked. I mean, like I said, you had the owner operator, and then you had the, 1 or 2 managers, and then you had your supervisors, team leads, or whatever. So yeah, you definitely had the white shirt management team. But like I said, they were all, you talk about the entire team on the same sheet of music, man. It was a thing. Now look back at it, it's a thing of beauty. But at the time, you just expected that's the way life was, right?
Like, yeah.
No.
So listen, I don't care whether you're in a restaurant business or not. If you want to grow your organization and keep quality up, the key is that you have to have strong leaders who all, as you said, play on the same sheet of music, have the same pointed direction they're running in. If you get a key leader in each one of those locations, that's the key to growth. It's the single biggest factor to determine your long-term success or not is your local leaders.
Yes, and I wish more people would take note of that the constraint on growth was the leadership pipeline, not the financial pipeline to build the buildings and just hire whoever as a manager.
Right.
That was really what it is. But you're right. I've kind of learned from that lesson, and everything I do for clients, I make sure, I don't do anything without starting at the top and get the senior leadership team. We have a 2-day that we do that gets them guys completely in sync on the same sheet. And like, if it doesn't start from the top, it's not going to be successful. And so I'm absolutely sold on how important that is. And I even ran into some research, and then we'll wrap this up and get to our questions in the next segment. But it was funny. I was at a state SHRM conference a couple of years ago, and this guy was doing a presentation, and it was interesting because he was sharing some research from Willis Tower Watson. And I never thought, I've heard the first part of it, I've heard from Gallup kind of similar.
Okay.
The second part was the part that really was like a smack in the face with a baseball bat. So he was like, okay, well, when you got senior leadership teams that are congruent and highly aligned and whatever, singing on the same sheet, whatever analogy, he said engagement scores can be as high as 78%. I'm like, oh, that's similar to Gallup. High functioning leadership teams, in the 70s. Okay, that's not, okay, I get it. He said, but when they're not, and they're perceived not to be, just as important, perception is reality when it comes to staff. He said engagement scores can be as low as 8%.
Ooh.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I'm like, full disclosure, Scott, my degree is not in mathematics, but if you've only got 8%, then there's 92% that are either that are not engaged at some.
Dave, that's real. Yeah.
And then it was funny because that right there was enough. And so when you're talking to HR people and people managers, they understand what those engagement numbers mean. You start talking engagement and they automatically plug in the dollars.
Yeah.
And I noticed after a while of not getting the traction I was thinking of, that CFOs and CEOs don't translate what they see as huggy-feely HR into dollars.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and that's where I ended up, lucky me, finally, the synapses finally started synapsing and it came together. And I realized two different pieces of data from Gallup that I'd known for years and never put the two together. And I was like, it's doing the smack in the head, like you could have had a V8 kind of thing. Well, one of them was their state of the workforce every year. They talk about, here's the amount that are engaged, who we love, right? Putting forth that extra discretionary effort. The not engaged, I call them clock punchers, right? And come in at 9, leave at 5. They do an okay job, but whatever, they're not in it.
Right.
And then you got 16% that are what they call actively disengaged, and I call them the bomb throwers. Man, forget getting a free chicken sandwich on your break, man. I'm talking about steak, shrimp, and lobster at the cafeteria every day, and you're still not happy, right? You know the guys, they just want to burn the whole place down. They're just not, they should have left a long time ago.
Right.
Well, I already knew that. But what I hadn't put together is the stuff that Forbes had reported on with Gallup data, that those actively disengaged employees cost their employer 34% of their salary annually from lack of productivity.
That can add up, man. That's expensive.
Well, I put it on my site. I tell everybody all the time, you just start doing the math. I built a calculator with those numbers, and you got about 250 to 300 people.
Yeah.
I got a 300 person place. Restaurant, manufacturing firm, doesn't matter. If I got 300 people with an average salary of 70 grand plus benefits, I run those just the Gallup average, right? Nothing else. Yeah, that's over $1.5 million a year walking out the door, man.
That's real money, man.
It is real money. The bad part is, and it's not their fault, your CFO will never tell you that because it's not on a P&L or a balance sheet.
Right, because he doesn't connect those dots.
No, and it's either disengagement or turnover. Both are deadly costly. And at least you guys have kind of baked it in the cake for your temporary line.
Right.
That, okay, we know we're going to get. Well, and it's funny you said 3 to 4 years, right? Well,
sometimes, yeah,
dude. Okay, you're calling them temporary, and you know where I'm getting ready to go with this.
I think so.
Most employers on God's green earth call those full-time
Yeah.
permanent workers,
Yeah.
right?
3 to
Because
4
most
years.
people don't last in a job more than 3 to 4 years anyway.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, Chick-fil-A folks that stay around, it's like 30 to 40 years. I mean, it's really unique.
I just laughed that the temporaries are about the same amount of time they stay as like people in a regular job. Best case scenario. Like HR directors are thrilled if they get 4 years out of someone, especially nowadays.
Seriously. No, that's real, Dave. I hadn't thought about that. But
So throw that feather in the cap that, hey, even our temporary people are staying longer than most people at other places.
That's awesome.
That's funny. Well, that's a good spot to wrap up this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We will be back for our next segment, and we will jump headlong into our questions. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are here with Scott Wozniak, and we are going to jump straight into our first question. So, Scott, what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
Yeah, if you want to boil it down, I think leadership is the stuff we do that makes other people better at the stuff they do. Job tasks we got to go accomplish ourselves, but that's not the leadership part of the job. The leadership part of the job is how I make others better at their job. And so how do I set them up for success, point them all in the right direction? In fact, I just break it down to 3 things leadership does. Leaders, first and foremost, provide clarity.
Yes.
How do I make you better? First, what is success? What am I even aiming for? How will I know if I got there? What's out of bounds, right? Like that is huge. And the normal human thing, even with good meaning, good intentioned team, the normal human process is for us to all kind of scatter and run in slightly different directions, right?
Right.
It takes real intentional effort to get everybody pointed in the same direction. And my favorite metaphor for this, it's like mowing your yard, right? Like you go mow the lawn and all the grass is the same height. And you think like, let it grow a week. It'll all be exactly the same height, just, like 3 inches higher. No, it's like a snarly, natural things don't grow in the same direction or the same size or the same. It's how humans work. It's how everything living works. We all slightly diverge. And it's like, so every week, every 2 weeks, you got to go remow the lawn and realign and realign and realign. If you let it loose, it scatters. And so leaders create clarity. Then I think they give them the resources to do the job because maybe, hey, we're all going to go climb that mountain, but we don't have any ropes. I don't have any shoes. And like, how are we going to pull this off? And like, so you give them the resources. And then the last part, I think is where most people start, is leaders provide help with the motivation, right? Try to do the inspiration and the challenges and provide incentives and pay them for it, or all the things you do to motivate people. I think that's the last layer. First, do we even know what we want to? And second, do I have the resources? I've seen so many times, Dave, where what looks like a lack of motivation is actually just lack of clarity.
Like, 100%.
It's like, oh, these people don't care. No, man, you're still using very vague language. They don't know what you want them to do. No wonder they're not fired up.
100%.
I've seen this in lots of business. Go provide quality service. Go be friendly and hospitable. What does that even mean, right? Like,
you may have 1 or 2 people that are just generally friendly, high type of people that know exactly what you say. They latch onto it and they'll run with it. And everybody else is standing there like,
and they're not rejecting you. They're not unwilling. They have no idea what you're talking about. And so this I see all the time. Clarity, clarity, clarity. So it's like, first, before you get mad at your team, why don't we just get real specific on what success looks like? Yeah. And then before you start motivating and hyping them all up, like, did you give them the tools to do it? Is this even realistic? Is it a good time frame? Does a system work? And so when you solve those 2 problems, then yes, you can get to motivational things and do all that stuff. But that's how I think about leadership. We make others better at their job with clarity, the resources, and then, at the end of that, motivation. But I think a lot of people think leadership is motivational speeches, right? Like they see the movies and it's the guy on the pedestal, like preaching to the crowd and like, that's good. It is one of the things you do, but it's probably the least common activity that we do as a leader. That's once in a while. Truett, we talked to this story in the last segment about Truett Cathy trying to get us to say my pleasure. He gave a great speech. True was a good communicator. He would get on stage and he'd give speeches a lot and do all this stuff. And we're like, yeah, that's a great idea, True. It wasn't until we started getting very clear on what it means and then putting resources to measure it and report on it. And like suddenly then we all started getting serious and it actually happening. Him just doing a speech, which is what happened the first couple of years, is like, we should do it. And we're like, good idea. And then nothing happened. It's not just motivation. That's the least frequent activity that has return. It's the other two stuff first. So that's how I think about it.
It's amazing how motivating a secret shopper report showing that you only did this 10% of the time or none of the time when you got to stand tall before the man and your boss and report in, hey, why does a secret shopper report say you weren't doing X?
Ding, you got it. That's a resource. That's a tool in a system, right? I could come yell at you every month and then hope you remember, or I could send secret shoppers post scores and let's talk about it. And yes, it's a whole other level when you actually resource stuff. So,
well, and I laugh. It's like, I'm not saying you're not doing your job. The data is saying you're not doing your job. It's like one of the reasons I love 360s and certain different organizational assessments. It's like, I know you're a jerk. You know you're a jerk. Everybody knows you're a jerk. I'm not saying you're a jerk. The data says.
It's just right there. It's right there.
Black and white, objective,
I'll give you another example that's more like technical business to business of this.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of management by picture. Like you got a job site on a manufacturing line, like a truck with your tools. And you're like, you clean it up and you set it up for the client well. And then you got all these arguments and the guy's like, my boss is such a jerk. He's always on my case. Like, actually, you're not being clear. Take a picture, laminate it, stick it in the truck, or maybe put it in an app. And then you're just like, hey, you're done when the job site looks like the picture. And then there's no like debate. And how do you feel about it? It's like, just hold the picture up. Does it look like that? No, keep going. When it's done, you're done. And it just removes so much tension and frustration. Is like, Dave's not being a jerk. The picture's clear. All Dave's doing is pointing out that it doesn't match.
There's an objective standard and it doesn't look the same.
And what do you know? Problems go away and people perform.
There's a little outline of a wrench with a little hanger here on the wall, and there's an outline and no wrench. Like, so there's a wrench in the outline.
Yes, exactly. That literal level of clarity, and suddenly your employee problems reduce like 90%. Listen, like here's the hard truth, Dave. When we as leaders aren't clear, we make our people guess. And when our people guess wrong, that's actually not their fault. It's our fault. Like, mad at our people, and they'll like slap them and punish them and all this stuff. Metaphorical slap them. Hopefully.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
we're doing all these like and we're shaking our fingers and putting them on. And the truth is mostly our fault. We keep making them guess, and then we just slap them until they get it right. That's most people's organizational process.
Right, and it's the worst in the world. And it's funny that you mentioned about having the clarity, then the resources, and then the motivation. And there was two things that came to mind. One, I've seen plenty of times, especially when on the leadership end of it, where somebody has the responsibility to get something done and they're not empowered with the authority or the, to be able to actually do it.
Right.
Because then they get mad because why didn't you do this? Because you didn't give me, it goes back to resources. It could be authority, but it's still a resource.
Yeah, I would say exactly. Authority.
It's a resource. But I had two recent, within the last few months, interviews, and they said something similar. I think you'll really like it. And I was really because it's such a similar model. It's kind of one of those things. One guy was Mike Mears. He was the chief people officer from the CIA. Nice. And he actually created the CIA Leadership Academy. And when he was talking about that, his model was, he said there's basically 3 levels that you have to get right first, the foundation. It said bottom level, psychological safety. They got to know that they can ask a question, not get their head bit off, right? Just that kind of thing. Second one is you got to build that first, and then you can start building trust. And when they know they can trust you, they know you got your back. Then that last level was clarity. Mm-hmm. You had to be super clear on exactly what they do. So as soon as you achieve those 3, which the clarity is your first one, but psychological safety, then the trust, and then the clarity is that once you got those 3, then you can pour gas on that fire and push them as hard as you want. Because they know exactly what you want.
Yeah, and they count on you to like not be doing it for their it's for their benefit. It's not, you're not trying to harm them. Like
correct, because you built the safety and the trust first.
I love that frame. Yeah, the CIA knows a little bit about people.
Yeah, they know a little bit about people. Let's just say he studied a lot about how people tick. Let's put it
Good
that
and
way.
real, right? Like they,
Yes,
yes.
yes. And then
Push the buttons.
and the other one was a retired Marine Corps colonel that commanded a bunch of platoons and everything out in Iraq. And I mean, he's long, heroic career. I gave him a hard time about did he go out on service related disability because his rack of ribbons was so big. I knew it had to throw his back off, right? Exactly. But anyway, I interviewed him and he's playing right now, but Giles Kaiser. And it's funny because he really got into what he called commander's intent. It's something great for the military, but we don't use that in the civilian world that much. It's 3-part: purpose, method, end state. Here's the why behind what we're doing. Here's what I need it to look like at the end. And roughly, depending on the circumstances, here's how we had planned on accomplishing it. But as long as the leaders are empowered, they're resourced, they know, hey, we know why we're doing it and what the end goal has to be. We may have to zig left instead of zag right.
Right.
But at least we get there because we know we're clear, to your point, of what the purpose and the end goal is. How we get there may be a little different.
That's it. Again, clarity, 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 man. That's a fun. I love that phrasing for it, commander's intent. But yeah, that's it. If they don't know, then they might just be either they don't know how to do it, or they're running down a path and then the situation changes and they don't realize this isn't the right path anymore.
Right.
You haven't made it clear. Yeah.
Right. If all I get is the purpose and the method, here's why we're doing it, and here's what I want you to do, and they don't know what the end goal is going to be when circumstances change, they can't pivot.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And you're like, you don't want them to pivot. Actually, what's that old military saying? Like, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, right? Like,
well, and I think it was even better. I think the great Stoic philosopher Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yes, that great philosopher Mike. He said some good things, man. Or bit in the ear. Am I allowed to say that one? Yeah. Everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I think pretty much that one was one of his most telling and true Mikeisms was, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
He would know. If anyone would know, Mike would know. That's hilarious, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, what's one of the biggest leadership challenges you've had to face?
Man, there's been a lot of tough leadership challenges that I've had to face. But one of the stories I'll tell you about was the time when I was working with a project with multiple teams from across the organization coming together. And I won't name the teams because you'll see why in a second.
Right.
And we had a budget and a plan. It was a very high profile project and everybody knew about it. And halfway through the year, one of my partners came and just said, oh, by the way, we've just spent all the budget for the whole project already. Not just their slice, like everything. They're like, well, yeah, I mean, I told you the costs were going to be a little tight and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to stay in budget. And I was like, yeah, but, and then I said, well, we got a lot of other things. Like, they're like, yeah, we'll try. And I was like, I thought that meant you were going to, like, well, we tried and it didn't work. We just blew all the budget. And we're halfway through the year and I've still got, it was an event. We're doing this national tour of live events and like CEO of the company is one of the speakers at the events. I mean, he couldn't be more high profile. And we have no money. And so like how I went back to my team and said, hey guys, this flagship project we're doing that everybody, including like the CEO is a part of and loves, we're out of money and we can't do the second half of the year the way we did the first half of the year. And what are we going to do? And it was probably one of the worst, most difficult seasons. I was going to say worst meeting, but like it lasted a lot longer than a meeting, Dave. It was like the next month was brutal. So the challenge here for me in this situation, it wasn't just a bad situation. The question for me as a leader talking to my team is, how much do I own the problem myself and be like, hey, right, leaders take responsibility for the problem, right?
100%.
On the other hand, I didn't actually do any of the things that like they miscommunicated to me and did like, hey, I was a little unclear, right? Lack of clarity. Dang it, right? We'll try to stay in budget. I thought that meant we'll stay in budget. They're like, well, try doesn't mean a commitment. And we did try and it didn't work, but we tried. And there were some very difficult conversations over there, but I think the bulk of it was on them. I didn't know we were out of budget. As soon as I knew, I told my team. So I wasn't like choosing to make bad choices.
Yes.
So lack of clarity, I'll own that one. And then the rest of it was on them, right? And so then, but on the other hand, I don't want to come to this team and like whine and complain and be like, it's not my fault and those people, right? I don't think that's good leadership. And so this tension of like, how much do I own? How much do I like blame on other people and process that? And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if I handled it right. I know I didn't totally blame them. What I decided to do was just own it and be like, it was my responsibility. I guess I should have checked on them monthly and not waited till the summer to find out how we're doing. I'm so sorry, team. I blew this. I'm going to go apologize to the leaders. And my team lost their mind. And it was the most unprofessional, emotional, some of the stuff said in there I cannot repeat on the air. Like, holy cow, guys. Now, just so you know, Dave, a month later, we had a special bonus of extra money. We tweaked a few things, dropped some of the fancy features on the event.
Nice.
During the last half of the year, and everybody thought it was great, right? It all worked out, right?
But for that little bit of time.
Oh, man, my team was like, we'll never trust you again. And it was like this really interesting tension. And so it was one of those moments, I think I pendulum swung too far because I've seen leaders who blamed it and I lost respect for it. So I was like, I'm not going to be that guy. So then I was like, it's all me. I blew it, guys. And I realized there's a certain amount of boundaries where I probably should have spelled out for them. Like, okay, here's what I said. Here's what happened. This is the part I think I messed up on. And this is the part that even though I own the solution, I'll fix the problem. I don't have to own that I made the mistake if I didn't make the mistake. And so it was an interesting balance because I thought I was being noble. Like, hey, I'm the leader who takes on the problems, right? And what I ended up doing was discouraging my team. I thought, this guy, he doesn't care about the project. This guy, he wasn't paying attention. He didn't matter. Like, no, I was at all the events, tracking all the stuff, doing all this. But I was naive about, hey, it's a mid-year check-in. How are we doing? And they're like, oh, yeah. I had to reach out to them, by the way. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, we did spend all the money. And I was like, wait, you weren't going to tell me? So it's his tension. I don't think the answer to this is you should just blame everybody else. That doesn't work. Tried that, didn't work. But I also don't think the answer is you should just like fall on the sword every time there's a problem and beat yourself up in front of your team. Because then your team loses its morale and motivation and like they don't trust you. And when back to your CIA guy, when they don't trust you, then it doesn't.
It's over. Game over at that point, man. You're done.
It took probably 6 months to rebuild the relationship trust in that team. And so that was the issue, is the way I framed it ruined their trust of me.
Gotcha.
Now, there have been times when I messed up and someone should have trusted me less because I legitimately was doing a bad job, right? Early in my career, I made a lot of dumb mistakes. This was later in my career. And I legitimately hadn't done so much that they should lost trust, but in my attempt to be noble, I totally like beat myself up in front of them. And then here's what I was hoping, Dave. I was hoping they would be like, no, Scott, we trust you and you've always been good. And I'm sure it was the other people. And
here comes that Greyhound, push him in front of it.
That's what happened, dang it. I'm like, come on, back me. And they're like, Scott who? I don't know the guy, right? Like, you're on your own.
Thinking the axe is going to fall. They're thinking people are going to lose their job. Like, hey, I got a mortgage and kids. Like,
that's what happened.
I'm not going down with the ship. But I think you're right. I think there's a balance because I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink. I love his book Extreme Ownership. But you're right. It could be, hey, this is my responsibility, my fault. But let me explain. And then when you explain, here's the sequence of events. You could exactly point to, okay, I didn't check in with them weekly, monthly, whatever, probably like I should have. Here's where I actually, fouled up. Or like you said, even if it's, yes, I hired the people, my fault. Yes, maybe I didn't train them right. Maybe I didn't give them the clarity that you were talking about.
Right.
Maybe we weren't exactly clear on whatever. So there's some level of, but I think you're right. There's a good balance between, because you're not going to constantly fall on your sword and at some point not have a job. I mean, at some point, like, okay, all right, well, you screwed this up and you did it 100%. Nobody else was involved and they're all good and you're all bad. See you, bye.
That is the lesson I learned, because it's trust. You can't lead people if they don't trust you. Now, if you blew it, then that's on you. You lost that trust, but you got to own. And I love extreme ownership as a concept. In practice, if you're constantly taking responsibility for everyone else's mistakes, one, it's a little bit dishonest, and two, they won't trust you.
Well, I think you hit it right. It's nuanced.
That's right. And I'm not saying lie. And again, if you swing the other way, where you never take responsibility, they don't trust you then either.
Correct.
There's an honest reality. Like, here's the real picture. My part, their part. I'm going to fix my part. But let me say this to leaders, because this might be a good challenge, encouragement.
Sure.
We'll say some in the back of my mind where I messed up with this was because I was thinking, if I had done everything right, then man, they would have shown up perfectly, right? If I was just the perfect leader, then everybody would perform well. That's not how it works, man. That you can do everything right and other people still mess up. And yes, I own the results. I'm the leader, but I'm not going to own the fact that others get to make their own choices. And this is what happened. You end up accidentally kind of devalue their ability to choose for their own life. And it's like, no, you can lead the horse to the water. You can make a nice smooth path down to the river and make it smooth, but he gets to decide whether he wants to drink or not. You cannot force people to show up. And that is both respectful for them and honest for you. And so that's the lesson I took out of this rough moment, was like, okay, own the results, but you don't have to pretend you did all the mistakes.
Awesome. No, I like that. And you're absolutely right, because like I said, there's a lot of things when it comes to leadership. In concept, it sounds really simple, but in practice, there's a lot more to it than it is. And you're right. You have to, a lot of times as leaders, you got to thread the needle on, okay, well, how much am I going this way versus that way? Right.
Yep.
And I think you're absolutely right, because, and I still go back to, I love the commander's intent thing that Giles said. And I love the framework that Mike laid out as well, as far as, the psychological safety, and then the trust builds on that, because obviously you can't build trust if they don't feel comfortable coming to you and having a conversation or asking a question.
Right.
Get my head bit off. And then, like I said, and all of that allows you to be crystal clear with them. And then what they decide to do with it from there is, that's their choice.
Yeah. They're adults, man. They get to choose.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell them all day long and explain, and they trust you and everything else, but if they're constantly coming in late all the time, I mean, at some point, you're not causing them to come in late.
That's right. That's right.
So, no, I get that 100%. So, no, it's a really good point. So, no, appreciate sharing it. Like I said, that actually sounds like a good segue to go ahead and wrap up this segment. So we'll come back with our final segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave in just a few minutes. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We're here with Scott Wozniak, and we are going to jump into our final two questions of the episode. So, Scott, what do you see as one of the biggest mistakes leaders make today?
Yeah, by far the most common mistake I see, and I do a lot of consulting and coaching with companies all over the world, US, Europe, South America. I was there all this year. And
nice.
Everywhere I go, whether it's culture or not, right? This is the one thing I see everybody doing, is we tolerate the misfit employee because they're getting their numbers, or because we've had him forever and he's a great guy. And like, we know he doesn't quite fit and we just don't deal with it. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be difficult. And I don't want to, what if he hits his numbers and we kind of need that? And like, what are we going to do? And so rather than deal with it, we just tolerate it. And I see this all the time. And the huge mistake in this is we're afraid of what we're going to lose if we hold them to standard, right?
Yeah.
Usually, let's be blunt, usually they're going to get fired, but only usually. Yeah. I'm not saying insta fire them, right?
No.
My HR and legal team want me to tell you, follow the proper paperwork.
Yeah, of course.
But what you do is you start holding the bar and like consequences with deadlines. And you say, listen, if it's not fixed by this time in a measurable way, not like I'm trying, like it actually is happening.
Yeah.
then we're going to start the process. Most of the time, that's going to end up with them fired.
Yeah.
Once in a while, though, they'll surprise me, and somebody will like turn themselves around and become an awesome employee. But let's say they're going to be fired. If we end up down that path and do this thing, we're afraid of what's going to happen. It's going to feel terrible. It's going to discourage other people. We're going to lose their results, right? Here's what we're afraid of that. What we're not doing is we don't notice all the ways that tolerating this misfit employee is depressing the performance of everyone else around them. Like we're like, oh, we might lose, but you're currently losing right now. That misfit is robbing trust. Because if you say there's two, like, hey, we really care about excellence. Yeah, but we tolerate Scott because, he's a good dude. Like, well, then nobody believes you care about excellence. And they're not going to give you your best because they know it doesn't matter. Or, man, we really care about these values, but I don't know, that Dave guy, he's a jerk, but he hits his numbers, right? Like that you do that kind of scenario, they'll say you don't actually care about those values. And then Dave's bad behavior like pulls everybody back and they're not going to give it their all. And I've done this, literally 100 times with clients now. And the day after, there's this boost of energy and suddenly people start stepping up and they breathe and it's like performance takes off and every time they're like, we should have done that months ago, man.
Yes, it's funny you say that because that was exactly where I wanted to go with that because it's happened 1,000 times and you're absolutely right. You say, wow, I feel so much better. I should have done that a long time ago. And everybody else is like, should have done that 3 months ago. Should have done that a year ago. Right. I mean, they're like, thank you for finally getting around to doing your job as the leader because we've been wanting that cat to get out of here for a long time.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I mean, if he's hitting the sales numbers, you got your best salesman who's a toxic employee.
Right.
You're thinking, oh my God, he's bringing in 40, 50% of the sales. Well, maybe it's because he's, dumping on all these other guys and creating such a bad environment they're not putting out. So when you get rid of him, they finally feel comfortable to step up and actually start doing their job.
Yes, and overall sales climb, not go down, because he's screwing everyone else's process up, sniping all the best ones so he has good numbers.
Exactly.
And you turn out everyone else could do well if he just got out of the way. It's huge. And I'll say this to leaders. If you're the leader listening, by the time you feel the pain, everyone else has been feeling it a lot longer. Like the senior leader is usually the last person to feel the pain of that problem because of your marvelous, you talked about this in the previous segment, that wonderful filtration system called
Oh yeah. No one's going to tell you.
Oh no. By the time you notice, dude, it's bad. It's been going on a long time. It's causing lots more problems than you think it is. And you're like, it just started. Oh no, man. Oh, this is a big, and they just sit because it's going to cost them in the short term. So they just kick the can down the road and they're like, next quarter, maybe, I don't know. Maybe he'll get better this time around. I told him to get better. He said he would. Like that kills leaders. So you want to talk about the biggest mistakes? It's by far the most common mistake all over the world, from whether it's the direct intentional Dutch or whether it's the very casual, Latin Americans. Everybody is dealing with their version of tolerating the bad leader because it's going to cost them. Man, bite the bullet, do the work. I'm telling you, on the other side of this is a whole pile of energy and performance you don't realize.
Yes, it is funny because what you said right there puts meat on the bones to Gallup's data saying that these actively disengaged employees cost the company that much money. And that's why.
That's it.
Because I can't do my job if you're ticked off and I'm just trying to, you walk down the hallway and all of a sudden I get snagged at the water cooler by somebody who just, is toxic. And then I got to listen to a bunch of this. I can't be working at my desk if I'm listening to you yap on about how bad everything is. I mean, it's just, and same thing. I understand that I don't trust the leadership because what is on the wall, mission, vision, values, isn't what you're doing because obviously this person here, so I'm not going to get my all. So absolutely, it just brings that productivity down across the board. It's a huge cost.
Huge deal, man.
I used to wonder years ago, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I used to think, oh my God, what a jerk. And you hear in the popular press and just everywhere, oh my God, Jack Welch was such a jerk. He said to go in and fire the bottom 10% of your people every year. Mm-hmm. And then when I thought about, well, if Gallup says 16% of the workforce on average, I mean, a lot of places are better than others, right? Some places are a lot worse. But if on average 16% are costing that kind of money, 16% of the toxic and the disengaged and stuff like that, it makes perfect sense. You want to get rid of those people for just the reason you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. I like Jack Welch's concept. The problem in practice, you just named it, is that what happens after you do this for 2 or 3 years, and hopefully the bad ones are gone, and now the 10% you're firing aren't actually bad.
Correct.
So it's like, this is a great turnaround strategy, but if you keep doing it, end up forcing your people to start firing people who are like, Dave didn't do anything wrong. He's just like, we had to pick somebody because one of the 10 of us has to be fired this year.
Right. It goes from a great turnaround strategy to a perfect suicide strategy.
Yes. So in practice, it worked really well until it suddenly didn't work really well. And now most people don't do it. But in the moment, there's that. What he did really well was raise the bar, because GE had gotten soft and sloppy during his regime. And he was like, you're either in or you're out. We're not tolerating it anymore. And during his time, GE became like one of the highest performing companies in the world. Now, then what happened was they ran that program too long, in my opinion.
Yes, 100%.
It started costing him because great people were being kicked out. But it's, again, the principle behind it is really good. I think the tactical way they implemented it ended up biting them. But yeah, man, don't tolerate those. And here's what I'd say. The main problem was the arbitrary, like, it's 10% because maybe this team has 20% and they need really cut, and this team doesn't have any because that leader was good, right?
Correct.
I would say to the leader, we'll do this exercise with the leadership team. And I'll say, okay, we're going to do this. It's just a leadership team. What happens here stays here, right? I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and you guys all blurt out a name on a misfit person that you guys are tolerating that you just need to deal with. And I'm like, 1, 2, 3. And they all say the same name. It's like, everybody knows Jim's the problem. Guys, every one of you knows it's not a debate that we need to deal with Jim. We just don't want to do it. Like, that's my exercise. I don't know if it's 10%. I don't know if it's 25%, but like, have the honest conversation. Who are you tolerating? Quit it. Like, do something about it. Again, give them a chance to change. Maybe it will blow your mind, but be ready to like hold the line and say, we're out. And I'm telling you, the day after Jim's gone, your company, your team, they just go to the next level.
Oh yeah. It's absolutely a weight off your shoulders. I remember 2 things. I remember a volunteer board that I was president of for a while, and we had a board member that started out outstanding performance. I mean, just knocking it out of the park, just amazing.
Yeah.
But toxic. And of course, talking to my other board members, I'm like, hey, we really need to deal with this. I've offered to talk to the person, sit down one-on-one. Hey, what gives? Let's talk. Let's talk this thing out. Absolutely refused to sit down and talk. Would not have the conversation. And the bad part about it was probably gave deference, my own fault, to the board more than I should have, because I was like, okay, they were like, give her another chance. We really like her. I know it's been bad, blah, 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 blah. And I had to wait until it got bad enough to where the rest of the board members, because I kind of needed everybody's support. It's a volunteer organization. For them to vote somebody off the island, it's a little
a little bigger deal,
a little much. Versus a regular regular job and appointment in a position. But it finally, she showed her hind parts in one particular board meeting enough to where everyone was like, okay, guys, I've been saying for a few months now, I've been trying to deal with the problem for a year. I've told you where I'm stuck at. Can't hash out something with somebody that they refuse to sit down and talk. Now that this has happened, are you ready to make the move? And they finally were like, yes, we're ready to kind of back you. And let's go ahead and make this thing happen. Right. I can promise you, Scott, now as hesitant as they were about it, because same thing, it was exactly what you're talking about. Like I said, it was a massive sell job on my end. Yeah. Trying to say, hey guys, this person's got to go. And when they did, the next board meeting, the smiles and the laughing it was just like a 1,000-pound weight was off everybody's shoulders, and every one of the board members was the same thing. Yeah, we should have done this sooner. And I'm like, I know, but I kind of needed your support, and I wasn't really going to try to.
That's real.
Be a total jerk about it, but man, was it just something else. It's like, we will gladly step in and help with the tasks of filling that spot to have this kind of good environment again.
Oh yeah, man. Worth every bit. That's
Oh
awesome.
yeah, it was funny. So it's just as much in in volunteer organizations, volunteer boards, stuff like that. Because there's a lot of for profits, nonprofits, and whatever that the boards are not compensated.
Right.
But man,
Yeah, I'm on some myself. Yeah.
a lot of them can be very contentious. A lot of them can be very, especially if you're not the board chair
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you don't have that final say.
Man, yes, we could go down that road, but I think some of the most challenging leadership is in that nonprofit volunteer sector because you don't have the blunt instruments of pay and firing. And so
Correct.
how do you actually motivate and align everybody when you're not throwing cash or threatening, career problems? And you end up with just pure leadership. You just have
Correct.
to inspire and motivate, clarity and trust and all the stuff we're talking about. You don't get away with threatening money after them. So
No. It goes back to a couple of things from Maxwell. Obviously, like the leadership is influence, right? And it talked about his 5 levels. And I had a couple of people argue with me that Maxwell's first level of leadership really wasn't truly leadership. I'm like, okay, you're you're grasping at straws, man. You're like picking hairs, right? At this point, you're getting nitpicky, but that level 1 positional leader, they just have the road authority and they're standing in between you and a paycheck, like you said,
right,
and that's it. Like I got to listen to you because I need a job.
yeah,
Beyond that, pound sand, right? I don't want. I have no use for you other than the fact that I got bills to pay.
You got it, man. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's get on to the last question. And what do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills?
Yeah. You actually named it earlier. I love 360 leadership reviews, where you do an assessment, and the 360 degrees idea is you go to your boss, you go to your peers, you go to the people that report to you, like a full circle of feedback. Yep. And you ask them all the same set of questions on leadership. There's lots of good versions of this. My company, I bet your company's got one. We do all this stuff. Like these are classics.
Yes.
You go through these things, and then you sit down, pull the results together. And then ideally you have like a leadership coach help you debrief what that means. Cause you got to filter through some of it. Like, okay, let's, what does that mean? And why is that one go off the rails? And there is a pattern, right? Maybe if everyone says you're awesome and one guy's mad, you can ignore that one guy. Maybe,
right. Maybe,
but maybe not. Maybe we need to figure out why he's mad and what's going on. So they help you process it. And then you come up with a plan. How am I actually going to go tactically improve that? What would it look like? There are lots of tools. I've been to classes. I love training classes. I've read books. I've written books on leadership. I've read probably 1,000 books on leadership between degree programs. I've read the region as well.
Oh yeah.
Personal reading. I love all those things. I love the big conferences and cool stuff, but nothing for me has been as impactful as a real 360 degree assessment of my leadership. It is. Now it's probably the most uncomfortable one too. Like, let's be real. Right? Like,
yeah, very true.
Crap, I'm going to have to listen to what they actually say about me. But if your goal is growth, then you got to get out of the comfort zone, man. That's the problem with the conference. In the conference, my brain automatically filters out the stuff I don't want to listen to and focuses on the things I like. And I come back with 3 new tactics on how to do better, visionary brainstorming. This is one of my natural traits. And they're like, yeah, we don't need more visionary brainstorming. Like, good for you. Scott.
You got that in spades. Let's work on the other stuff.
Thank you. And I'm like, other stuff. Visionary brainstorming. And the 360 makes me deal with Scott, we love your visionary brainstorming. But in my early career, Scott, you miss the details. You don't follow through. We forget to talk about things. And it's like, oh, but that's not fun. And so, that 360 reviews I've done it several times in my life. And every single time it has ended up being a pivotal moment to take me to the next level. Now, following that, I benefit a ton from working with a leadership coach. I am a leadership coach and I have my own leadership coach. Like I know the questions. In fact, crazy as hell, I literally trained the guy. So I ran a leadership coach training organization back in the day. I trained the guy personally, who is my leadership coach. I know exactly the questions he's supposed to ask me because I told him to ask.
Hilarious. I love it.
And the process of having a coach partner with you to work on feedback you got from other people, that has changed my life. It's just so powerful. So that's my personal journey. And that's where I recommend leaders, if you really want this, buckle up. You need to put on your big boy, big girl pants.
Yep.
It's not going to be comfy, but this will take you to a truly next level.
Yeah, it's amazing what you find out when you can get the real scoop. And the nice part is if you have and there's a lot of great tools out there.
Yeah.
I've seen some that are good, some that are phenomenal. I've seen some that the assessment's great, the dashboard sucks. I've seen some that the assessment's pretty good, the dashboard's amazing, what you can do with it. So, I mean, they're all out there. The questions may be a little bit different. You can tweak them however. The biggest thing is when you have the written comments and being able to take those and sanitize them, because so many times if you have a limited,
they're complaining about this one project and there's only one guy on that project. Like, this is where having a coach to help you debrief that allows your team to be raw and real without giving away who said what, so everyone can be honest.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too I've always been big on is almost treating it like if I go in and I'm doing something. A lot of times we'll do. I've got a half-day facilitation I'll do with everybody but the CEO, right? Everybody but the department head, right?
Yes.
Like, you're not welcome. Like, go away.
Right.
Okay, because I need honesty, and you in the room doesn't get me honesty.
That's right.
And so we'll go through and we do the facilitation, have a lot of fun, ask all kinds of questions, and get a lot of dialogue. But the biggest thing is sanitizing the answers and letting them know ahead of time. I'm just as committed to your privacy on these answers and making sure these are sanitized, that he gets the info he needs without ratting any of you out as a physician would be. And hey, Dave just left, Scott just came in. I'm not going to say, hey, did you realize that the guy who was just in here, man, it's got, the AIDS and the clap and the gallbladder and the, whatever, man. I mean, you're thinking like a HIPAA. I said, I take this stuff as important as a physician would take HIPAA.
That's awesome.
And it's a big deal. And like I said, when you can't assure that privacy, then they don't have the trust. They don't have the trust. They're not going to give you the right answer. You don't have the right answer. You don't have the good data. If you don't have the good data, the check cleared the bank, but it was pretty much worthless.
That's right. That's it, man. No, if you can get someone like you to get real honesty in front of you, it could change your life. I mean, that's changed my life.
Yeah.
It's powerful, man. There's nothing more powerful for me than that part of the process.
No, I like that. Really digging into a leadership 360 and getting a 360 done on you, with the follow-up to really hone in on where you need to improve on and where you're good at as far as what other people perceive.
That's right. That's right. Well, you named it earlier. Leadership is influence, and the perception is like at the heart of this thing. You could think you're trying something. What are they actually experiencing? That's where the real leadership magic happens. Not in your head, in their head.
Well, and that's why it really spoke to me when I was at that SHRM conference a few years ago, and they were going, that Willis Towers Watson research took it one level deeper than Gallup did and said, okay, well, when the senior leadership team isn't all in alignment, or it's perceived that they're not.
Right.
So they think they're getting along great. Right. Everybody below them thinks it's an absolute circus, right?
Yeah.
And a goat rope, and they're just like, okay, this is ridiculous, right? But everybody, oh man, we're great, we're humming along, everything's fantastic, and guys down here, I'm like, man, this is a nightmare, right?
I've seen that so many times. Yeah, again, the leader's the last person to notice the pain. Everyone else is living in it, and you're like, what pain? It's all great. Oh no, man. Oh, it's a mess. Yeah. That's,
Well, like I said,
I'll say this. Sometimes people have resisted when I've talked about this to leaders and like, I don't want my people to like find out all this bad stuff about me and like think badly of me as a leader. And I'm like, no, hold on. You're the only one who doesn't know. Everyone on your team knows that's going badly and talks about it probably.
Yep.
You're the only one in the room who's not aware of all these problems. They're not going to find out that you've got problems. You're going to find out what everyone else already knows. And so it's not doing you any good to stay ignorant of what everyone else on your team is aware of.
Exactly. And I'd love to get your comments on this one. I laughed. There were two particular situations. And like I said, keep the anonymity, but one of them was a rather larger company. It was a healthcare company. And, of course, CEO comes down with the Brooks Brothers suit, making whatever they're making, because, a couple mil, whatever. And, walks into the cafeteria and asks a bunch of the staff members, hey, how are things going? How do you like your job? How is everything going? And what do you think they're going to say? Right? They're making $12 an hour. He's making $2 million. Oh, hey, boss, everything's great. And then he goes back upstairs and all of a sudden, hey, everything's great around here. And it's like, which is one of the reasons why I tell CEOs, I said, I'm not trying to blow up the chain of command, boss, but you got to come up with some good, solid back channel communication lines so you can get some of the real scoop that's not filtered from the front lines.
That's
people you trust.
Yeah. And again, to your face is going to be the least honest, least comprehensive data you got. You got to find another process.
Yeah. And like I said, if you have 3 or 4 frontline staff that you really trust and that you can have conversations with kind of on the down low, great. Mm-hmm. Other one was, I remember a CEO had a particular, personal situation, whatever. And we were discussing, it's like, well, basically it was like, nobody else knows. And I'm thinking, I think they have it included in the new hire orientation is how much everybody knows to the point. I think it's in the handbook.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I didn't have the heart to say it, but that's what I was thinking. Like,
it's so true, man. It's so true. That's hilarious.
And then the last one I love is I was interviewing David Gum as the CEO for National Fruits, like White House applesauce, all the White House apple cider vinegar, all that stuff. They're here local.
Oh, nice.
Which is in Winchester, which is cool because I grew up with the brand. And then all of a sudden, I'm literally right down the street from it. Cool. Well, they did a lot of stuff with the USO. And so they got invited because I guess some of the Bushes were big with the USO at the time. This is years ago. They got invited to some picnic or something or whatever at Kennebunkport. So him and the family are in the RV. They're going, right?
Yeah.
So they're about 3/4 of the way up there. And I guess they ended up having a fatality at the plant, which heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. And so they're like, hey, what do we do? And once a lifetime opportunity, fatality. Of course, he did the right thing. Stop, turn around, come straight back.
Yeah.
And I laughed when the story wasn't funny, but one particular aspect of it I got a chuckle out of because he said, well, I turned around. You obviously did the right thing. He said, because they were watching. And I said, here's where I want to stop you. They're always watching.
Yes.
There's never a time like word to the wise. They're always watching. There's never a time that they're not noticing everything that goes on.
That's right. Yeah. Welcome to leadership, right?
Yes. Yeah. And you don't think they're watching everything, and they are watching everything all the time. And back to kind of Mike's, thing with the safety and the trust. Mm-hmm. To me, personal pet peeve, nothing blows trust more than when you got the guy doing the corporate speak, and then that's how he speaks and how he acts are two different things. Or like I said, the vision, mission, the true values, they're in the handbook. You get them in orientation. You see them on the wall when you go past the C-suite. But other than that, what is on the wall and what's actually lived out every day don't jive. Yeah. And when they don't, that just blows a hole into trust, and it's downhill from there.
That's it, man.
Awesome. Well, tell the listeners how they can connect with you, with your company. You talk about the book, website, connect to LinkedIn. Any way that they're like, man, I have got to get me some more of this Scott guy. How would they go about doing that?
Nice. Yeah. I've got a free newsletter that you can come get a bunch of stuff. We talk about kind of how to build a great organization and do great, kind of build these great experiences. So you can go to swozconsulting.com. That's SWOZ consulting.com. And then you'll see on the top menu bar is the newsletter link, or there's often a pop-up that says you can sign up to the newsletter there. That's a good way to get free content and see what I'm up to. And you mentioned the book, man. Thanks for mentioning that. I've got a book on how to create raving fans. It's called The Customer Experience Engine, Building a Legendary Brand. So Make Your Brand Legendary is the title of the book on creating raving fans. And so it's got all my best systems and tools and tactics from working inside Chick-fil-A and all these other companies. And so you can find that on Amazon or wherever else you look for books. It's everywhere. We hit number 1 in the customer experience category. So pretty fun to see that start taking off. So that's going to be the deep dive, or you can go get the free stuff on the newsletter. swozconsulting.com or Make Your Brand Legendary. Either of those are a good chance to get more of this stuff.
Nice. And I'm assuming they can reach out and connect with you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Yeah. Look me up, Scott Wozniak. There's not a lot of Scott Wozniaks on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. Yeah.
I was going to say, you got consultant, Apple, right? You look at Wozniak, consultant,
Apple,
right?
Yeah.
It's kind of it's your two choices, right?
There you go.
Chicken and computers, right? What do you?
I think it's a good combo. It's a good combo.
No, it's not bad at all. It is not bad at all. But no, and we will put the links down in the description so anybody can click on the links and they can, like I said, grab the newsletter, snag the book, check out the website, connect on LinkedIn. all the good stuff, and hopefully they'll reach out and, like I said, enjoy some of that. Like I said, and I know I'm not a fortune teller, but it's kind of like um, back in the day, the great one, the great Karnak. Because I could see an Amazon order in my future, right? I'd be able to, not a fortune teller, but I could certainly see that customer experience book being on the short list
Awesome.
on my next Amazon order. That's for sure. So I would encourage everybody to go out and snag that.
Thanks, Dave.
So with that, thanks again, Scott, for being here, and we will see you guys next time on the next episode of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. Take care.